Oh, still in 1956. I had, as I told you last night, I had many chances of being alone with Baba. Not that they were planned by me, or this happened by accident. And one time was, of course, when I was with Baba, which I left out in the Delmonico. Each one of us had a private interview with Baba. And we met him in his own room. The mandali was private, in quotes. The mandali were in the room, so it wasn't really completely private. But when my turn came, I went in and I sat down at his feet. He was in an easy chair, and I was leaning on his knees like this, and I was looking up at him. And the first thing he said to me, he said, you know how he did with his big eyes, he said, you know, Mani loves you very much. You know, I was just corresponding a lot with Mani at that time, and we got to know each other. We write back and forth constantly and telling each other all our intimate things. And I said, I love her too, Baba, but I love you more. Well, he just loved that, you know. And I'm very much interested in Mani, but I wasn't want to talk about anybody. I just wanted to talk about Baba. Yeah, that was all I was interested in. And then I thought, well, here's my chance to ask him for something, which if I can get it, I'll have it made. I said, Baba, I said, I would like to love you more than I love myself. And he said, do that, and you'll have everything. Let's see how we got out of that very neatly. So that was the one time I was alone. And the second time was when I was in the boathouse with him, which I told you about last night. The third time was when I was good. Kitty told me I could do some of my editing, which I was doing for Baba all the time at that time, typing, editing, and so forth. And I said, I don't know where to go. Where'll I go with all this stuff Baba gave me? The Kitty says, well, go onto the guest house porch. Nobody will be there. Of course, you know, Kitty, she's always telling you things that never work out that way. So I went to the guest house porch, and I wasn't there a few minutes. It was running. Baba came right out of the guest house. He used to have his meals there. And he was his table was set up right in the window that faces right onto the guest house porch. I think many of you have seen it. And I was there on the big long table, and they're facing the window. And of course, when you were with Baba, you couldn't sit down. The minute he came in, you stood up automatically. And I started to pick up my stuff and I thought, God, I'm intruding. I started to get up, and Baba says, stay there. The mandali came in. They put out his meal, and it was very difficult to work and sit in Baba's presence. And the mandali was gabbling away. I guess it was Gujarati or something. I don't know what they were talking about. Going around crazy. And then they left, and I was alone with Baba. And I could have stolen a look at him occasionally while I was working. And I don't think he could have been at the table more than 5 minutes, as if it was breakfast. I don't know what he ate, but he ate. I never saw anybody eat like that before. It was sort of disinterested, as if he was putting gas in a car. That's how he ate, you know. And then he got up, and the mandali came, you know, and they went away. But that was the third time I was alone with him. The next time I was alone with him was at that point of my honeymoon, when everybody else was too far away, and I was very close to him, as I described last night. The next time was when we were out in Los Angeles. We were walking. I was walking into the corridor of his hotel, and nobody was around. And I was wondering where Baba was, so I was going toward his room. All of a sudden, Baba came down the corridor alone. Now, Baba, as you people have met him, you know, Wendy, he's never alone. Or somebody was there, but this time, for some reason, he was alone. And I looked at him. We walked along together for a while down the corridor. And I looked at Baba. I said, you know, Baba, I must have some good karma, since I seem to be running into you all the time by accident. And he gave me this big look with his eye, you know. You can't describe Baba's looks. I mean, they tell you worlds. Just worlds. It was just the most wonderful experience to be with him like that. Well, that was the end of my being alone with Baba until 62 when I was in India. But now to get back to I'm going to keep to my outline, otherwise I'm getting out of... Oh yes, the next thing that happened in 1956 was one day Baba was receiving new people into the center at the barn and giving for the first time. And while he was giving the audience, Margaret was set at the door to usher people in and introduce them to Baba. And I stood in the doorway and I was watching people come in and go out. And then I saw Baba call Margaret to him, and he made a gesture to Margaret about his throat, like this. And I thought, oh yes, he had told Margaret too that she was supposed to repeat something to everybody that came in. I don't know what it was. She had to say something that didn't make any sense at all to everybody that came in. But when he made that gesture, I didn't know what he had told her, but when he made that gesture, I panicked, because he had told everybody at the center that if he ever got a cold, he'd go back to India. Or, he just couldn't stay, because he was very sensitive throat, and he got cold very easily. And I remember that. Oh my God, he's got a sore throat. He'd go back to India. And that was one thing we were all scared to death he would do. We wanted to keep him there as long as possible. So I flew out of the barn, and I rushed around and I said, where can I get throat lozenges for Baba? I asked everybody. Finally somebody said, well, Kitty has some, but she's in the guest house. So, it's quite a distance from the barn to the guest house. But I started hurrying as fast as I could toward the guest house. On the way, I met Harold Rudd coming on the car, the opposite way, because everybody was streaming to the barn, coming from God knows where. So I was going against the tide. Harold Rudd said, where are you going in such a hurry? I said, I have to get to the guest house to get some throat lozenges for Baba, who's got a sore throat, and what's going to happen. He said he'd go back to India if he got sick. So he says, oh my God, he panicked too. He says, get in, I'll take you to the guest house. So I got into the car, and he drive to the guest house. It seemed like everybody wanted to stop us. Oh, come on, take us to the barn, will you? Turn around and take us to the barn. Everybody would hitch a ride. House says, no, we can't, we gotta go. And he was cussing and swearing, and he was red in the face, and I was in a panic. And we were two of us were acting crazy. It was my fault, really, but we were driving back. Finally, we got to the guest house, and I saw Kitty and Elizabeth there, and I said, oh, Kitty, have you got any throat lozenges for Baba? He's got a sore throat, he's caught a cold. I'm afraid he's going back to India if we don't do something about it. He said, yes, I have some right here. And I thought she was very calm, and so was Elizabeth. I just couldn't seem to get them excited. Howard was excited, I was excited. And so I said, he might go back. And so Elizabeth said, don't tell anybody he's got a sore throat. I said, why not? Baba can have a cold if he wants to, can't he? She said, yes, of course he can. But she said, a lot of people wouldn't understand. There are a lot of new people coming in today. People have preconceived ideas of who God is and what God is like, and God doesn't catch colds, and God doesn't get sick, and all that sort of thing. So God doesn't conform to what they think he should be. The heck with him, So I understood what she meant. So I said, okay, I don't intend to tell anybody, but we've got to get back to the barn and give him the lozenges. So we got back in the car, and Harold drove like crazy back to the barn. Lucky we didn't hit anybody. We got in. I got into the barn, and I saw Eric. I said, please, Eric, give these throat lozenges for Baba for his throat. I thought Eric was kind of puzzled. Why should he, So apparently he took them to Baba. I don't know what happened, but a little while later, Baba made an announcement. He said, some of my lovers have gone mad. They think I have a sore throat when I don't have any. Which was true. I was a little bit. You're not quite right in your head when you're with Baba. You're just not. And what he had said to Margaret is your throat sore from repeating all these, which I found out from Margaret later. That's what he said. So I thought he was saying his throat was sore. But later on, I was in the barn with Baba, and I looked at him, and I guess I was just feeling so much love for him, and it was coming out of my eyes. And Baba looked at me, and I saw him give that look, and he looked right in my eyes. He said, to Eric. She said, she loves me very much, which I thought was sort of interesting because I didn't know I cared that much. It was just you just didn't realize it at the time. Well, that was another incident in 1956. Then there was another time in 56 where we had some ceremony in the barn. I'm telling you this because I don't know the answer to it at all. I don't know what it meant. Someday, maybe somebody is wiser than I am. They'll tell me what this was all about. I'm going to ask Moni, I think, if I don't get an answer next time I go to India. Maybe she knows what happened. But we were all in the barn, and Baba came in later. First of all, I was sitting on the floor. It was crowded. You can imagine all those people stuffed into the barn. And, the fireplaces, I think there was Adele and Phyllis. And we were sitting on the floor. I was cross-legged on the floor, leaning against the wall. And there was an aisle from the front door of the barn coming around past me, right to Baba's chair. Well, Baba came in, very solemn. Everybody was quiet. He said, we were told ahead of time, don't rise, stay where you are. So that's why I was sitting cross-legged on the floor. And Baba came in the door, walked very slow, measured steps with his sandals on, right past me, and as soon as his foot hit the floor, his foot almost brushed my knee. That's how close it was. I don't think anybody noticed it but me. The only reason I did was because, he was right almost on top of me, when he went by me. And just as his foot hit that spot on the floor, his foot slipped. Ever so slightly. It was just a slight slip. He stopped dead. He turned around, and he walked out again out the front door. And I looked at the spot. What was that? I touched it with a thing. It wasn't greasy. There was nothing there. I thought, that's funny. We waited. He came in again. He walked past his foot hit the exact same spot. It didn't slip. And he walked right and he sat in his chair. Now, it's a very small thing, but he apparently felt it was meant something. What did it mean? I'd love to know, If I could find out why he had to come out and do that again. There's something, I don't know what. So I want to try and find it. If I ever find out, I'll tell you all. Then we went to Washington, D.C., where Baba had to meet members of the press. And there was some arrangement made for the rest of us to be funneled around Washington to see the sights. And, if I wanted it, I was willing to do it, but I really wasn't interested in any sights. When Baba was there, that's all that mattered. So Baba went around. There was apparently had been some argument or discussion about some people not wanting to go here and others not wanting to do this and that, and I don't know what happened, but eventually Baba came to everybody and said, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? He came to me and said, Billy, what do you want to do? And without thinking, I said, I want to be with you, Baba. Which, of course, I knew ridiculous. I couldn't be with him. He had to be with the press. So he went like this. He was so expressive, But it was just a little thing. I just thought I'd try to bring to you little incidents where you could reveal to you what Baba was like in many ways. Then we took a plane from Washington via Texas to Los Angeles. And then from there we were there for a while, and then we went from there to San Francisco, and we visited Ojai. Now, while we were in San Francisco, Kitty was preparing Baba's breakfast. For some reason, she had some trouble with the stove or something. She said to me, Billy, do you think you could go around Los Angeles? I knew nothing about Los Angeles, my first visit there. See if you can find some kind of a stove. Those little stoves where we could heat up something for Baba and so on. I said, well, I'll try. I don't know if I can find the kind of stove you want. So I went looking for this stove. Well, I went all around. I couldn't find a stove. There was nobody had a stove such as she had described. And while I was out, I thought, well, I can't find a stove. What am I going to do? Baba has to eat something. And I got a funny it shows you kind of the state of mind I was in at the time. He has to have something, but I have to get him something for breakfast. What can I get him? And I thought Baba has to have something pure. Now, why in hell he had to have something pure? I don't know. Since he creates everything, he had to have something pure. And I thought, well, what can I get him? And I thought, well, the purest thing is something untouched by human hands. So I thought, what can I get that's untouched by human hands? Well, I thought I'll get it comb honey, because that's untouched by human hands. But what about the bees touching it? Are they so pure? You know? Well, I'm going to get him comb honey. Then I thought, well, what, he can't just sit there eating honey. Well, I went to a health food shop and I got him some whole wheat bread. Now that was touched by human hands. Now why I could get, you see, illogical. It was so illogical. I don't know where my mind was with Baba, but really I wasn't with it at all. So I buy this bread and this honey, a big blob of honey and a big hunk of bread, and I take it back. I said, Kitty, I can't find the stove. Oh, but she says, well, I got it all solved anyway, you know, which of course was typical of Kitty. So I said, well, I went to Erich again. Erich seemed to be the go-between all the time. I said, Erich, this is for Baba's breakfast. Will you give it to him? Oh, yes, all right, he said. Oh, poor Erich, you know, I don't know who thought I was crazy. But a little while later, Baba made an announcement. He said, I want the 5. Incidentally, the 5 were Phyllis, Adele, Beryl, Sylvia, and me. Baba always grouped us together as 5. I understand that Baba always had 5 people he worked with. Years ago, it was Margaret Krask, Minta, Delia DeLon, and I don't know who the other 2 were. There was 5 then. And at this time, we were the 5. And Baba always called us in together as the 5. And he said, I want all 5 of you to take this bread and honey before we were scheduled to go to Ojai that day, to Agnes Barron's place. I want all 5 of you to take this bread and this honey, and I want you to eat it all before lunch. Well, you can imagine. We didn't have time to eat it then. We had to take it on the bus with us. And we had to go up there. We had to eat just before lunch. We had to eat all this. You know, all right, I made the mistake. It's all right for me to eat the bread and honey, but why should the other four? They didn't done anything. Why did they have to eat the bread and honey? You know? Took the burden off me a little bit, but you know, it took me years before I could eat bread and honey again, you know. And then Baba said, eat all of it. Not just eat it, but eat all of it. And then we had to eat lunch. You see how Baba will either give you too much or he'll take everything away. I mean, he makes you experience the real opposites. So they got stuck with the bread and honey. And that was the story of my interfering. And there's another incident, which I might as well tell you now since it fits, about people interfering with Baba's digestive tract. You know, this is what had happened to Baba so many times, you know, that if he listened to everybody, he would have been dead from indigestion, you know, from people telling him what to do. When we were I guess it was in Ojai, yes. Yes, this is an interesting thing. Dana Field apparently had told Baba that he should eat a lot of fresh fruit. It was very healthy for him. And he bought a whole lot of fruit for Baba. Well, ordinarily Baba wouldn't have eaten it, I suppose. But for some reason or other, he ate the fruit. And later on that day, Baba got us all together in the living room in Agnes's house. And we're all sitting around, and he said, we're going to have meditation today. Because we never meditated. You know, this time we were going to meditate. This was something new. So those who were into meditation, boy, they were excited. This was great. This was stuff. You know. Me, I don't care about meditation, but all right. Bob ordered meditation. We had meditation. So everybody got silent and quiet. And we all meditated. And while we were all quiet, all of a sudden we heard this sonorous rumble in Baba's stomach. And then Baba clapped his hands. We all opened our eyes. And Baba said, you see, Dana, I can't eat fruit. It's not good for Baba. You see what happens? So Dana got a lesson too, you see. Dana was telling him what to do, just like I had been telling him what to do. So But Baba had his own way of teaching. You see, he ate the fruit and made this big ridiculous thing of meditation, and then had this rumbling going on, just to teach Dana a lesson. Instead of lecturing, you see, he created a situation to teach you. Just like he created a situation about the beach. That's the beach thing. Teach me a lesson. There was an incident before we left the center. I forgot to tell you. Baba had us all stand in a circle. This was, by the original kitchen, is that big space, open space by the original kitchen. He had us all stand in a circle about him one morning. Bob was just in a white sadra. He had no coat on. He had his hair down. He looked like Christ. Really, he did. It was amazing how he looked that day. He stood right there, and all of us, hundreds of us, all in a big ring around him. He said, I want all of you to look into my eyes until I tell you to stop. And we all had to stand very quiet. We all got very quiet. And it was such a stillness. I didn't even hear the birds or the insects anymore. It was as if all of nature got quiet. And we all looked into his eyes. And I don't know how long it lasted. It must have been could have been more than 5 minutes, maybe a little longer. And we were able to stare right into his eyes. And then he clapped his hands, and that was that. He never explained what that was all about. That was it. It was the end of that. No more, never explained these things to us. Now, different people had different experiences of that, but my experience was with the dead silence. The minute he clapped his hands, everything in nature seemed to come alive and start sounding again. That was my experience of that incident. Now we go back to Ojai again. There was one funny incident where I went into the living room, and there was Baba with the mandali, and Baba was trying on hats. I don't know where he got all these hats from. And then he came to me and said, come on, and he gave me this tam. He says, put this hat on, you want to put this tam on his head. Well, I tried to put the tam on Baba's head, and all of a sudden, as I was putting on his head, I thought, I'm putting a hat on God, What a ridiculous situation. What am I doing, And all of a sudden, he seemed so delicate to put this hat on. And I couldn't get the hat on him, It was it's just a weird sensation of trying to put a hat on Baba. But Baba didn't seem to notice how I felt, and he was camping around and having so much fun with all these hats, trying this one and that one and showing off and acting the part of this hat and that. It was a lot of fun. But when you were the one that was trying to do it, though, it was quite different. It's really very strange. When Agnes Barron's dog came up to him, Baba petted it, and he told Agnes Barron that dog would be a human in its next life. I thought that was interesting, too, because Baba had touched it. When we were in San Francisco, after we left Ojai, we went back to San Francisco. Marianne, as I told you, Marianne Florsheim had been running things as the chairman of the hospitality committee and taking care of all logistics and everything, and she'd done a lot of work. I had helped only in small ways, and I had been running the Operation Topsy, writing to all the people all over the United States and so on. So my part was not that strenuous. But when Marianne and I were alone with Baba thanked Marianne and me for all the work we had done. I said, well, Baba, it was nothing, because I felt, compared to what Marianne had done, I felt kind of crummy accepting thanks to Baba. Besides, it was sort of an honor and a privilege to be able to do any work at all for Baba. It gave you the chance of being close to him and talking to him, being with him. I mean, it was a lucky break, really. And so that's why I replied the way I did, and Baba made a gesture as if to say, oh, you're just too modest, Then while we were there, Baba suddenly made a statement. Out of a clear blue sky, he said, Don Stevens is one of my mandali. Just like that, boom. And Mary and I looked at each other. I thought, what was that all about? We went outside. I said, why did he say that? He must have meant that for you. She said, no, but he must have meant it for you. I said, well, what was that all about? That's another thing we know nothing about. Why, out of a clear blue sky, he was not a subject. I mean, we weren't discussing Don or anything about him. So why that he made that statement at that time, I don't know. Well, Baba had the five of us write letters to Mayor and Mani while he was in the United States. Every day we had to write a letter to India, tell what had happened and so on. And we were doing quite well until one day at the Holiday Lodge in San Francisco, I just ran out of everything to say. What the hell can I say now? And I was sitting in my room trying to figure out what I'm going to say to Mayor and Mani. There's just nothing else to say. So I sat there doodling. And then I remembered what had happened only that early that morning. I had been with Baba, and as I was looking at him, all of a sudden I saw his eyes cross like this, up this way. I don't know if you see anybody cross their eyes that way, but they went up just like that, and the look of absolute bliss on his face. I just had a quick glimpse of the tremendous bliss he was feeling, and I knew at that moment that he was feeling this bliss continually, all the time. It was as if he had parted the curtain a little bit and then had a glimpse of it, just like that, and shut it again. And when I was doodling in my room, I began to think of that, and I started writing about it, how Baba had crossed his eyes, and I saw the eternal bliss, and so I don't remember what I said. And I was writing this. There's a knock on the door. It was Eric. She says, Baba says, bring your letter. Because every day when we wrote letters, we had to read them to Baba first before we could send them. Incidentally, because I had been writing to Mani so much, the first letter I ever wrote, I wrote the two of them together. I wrote, Dear Mani and Mara. And Baba said, Dear Mara and Mani. So from then on, we always wrote, Dear Mara and Mani. So right away he established the precedence, you see. Well, I said, oh, Eric, I don't have a letter. He says, well, we better come anyway. Well, when Baba called you, you went, and right away. So I went. I left the letter there, but my doodles, it wasn't a letter. I went to Baba, and Phyllis and Adele and Burl each read their letter, and then Baba came to me and said, Billy, read yours. I said, well, Baba, I don't have a letter. I said, why don't you have a letter? I said, well, I couldn't think of anything to say, and all I did, I was doodling, I said, and just putting train of thoughts down to try to make up a letter, but I really don't have a letter. So he said, he says, bring your letter. I thought, oh God. So he says, bring it, you bring it. So I left and I went and got my letter, and I came back, and he said, read it. So I began to read it until I got to the part with the crossed eyes. I thought, I can't read this, saying Baba's got crossed eyes. You know, just, when you just write things like that, you don't expect anybody to know about it. So I said, well, Baba, this part, you know, is just, it's not very interesting. It's nothing that I think you would wonder. He says, read it. What could I do? I had to read it. So I read it. He says, send it. He seemed pleased. I don't know what Mary and Monty must have thought of what that garbage was that I wrote. But you see, you can't tell with Baba. The point is you do what he tells you to do, and you do it then right away. But see, Baba was so human. He was so more human than you are, more human than I am. So much more approachable than any of us. We just have no idea what he was like. Even I can't realize when I see pictures of myself with him, I think if I didn't have those pictures, I'd say I dreamed the whole thing. It wasn't real. It couldn't have happened. It just couldn't have happened, but it did. That's the weird part. It did. There's another incident. It shows how Baba was intolerant of intolerance. There was a man who was a lovely man. He was really very nice, but he had some very Calvinistic type of thinking in his makeup. I guess it was from Christian upbringing. But he was saying, oh, you can't you can't dance or be interested in dancing and be on the spiritual path. It's not spiritual. It's just not spiritual. Some of them even said you can't listen to the radio and be spiritual. No music, no dancing. No. But he was. I thought, well, I didn't argue with him. Well, that afternoon, the dancers put on a show for Baba. Each dancer gave a little dance of their own. Some of them did it, dancing together. And one of the girls did a slightly erotic dance with a lot of hips and this and wiggles and, that sort of thing in it. And after it was all over, Baba thanked the dancers. This man was sitting right next to me, so that's why I got the whole thing. I was very interesting spots to catch things. I don't know if they were accidental or not, but when Baba had thanked all the dancers, he had asked different people what they liked best. And somebody said, well, Baba, what did you like best? And Baba says, I like the one with all the... He went like that, And then as he said it, he looked at this man. I never heard another word about dancing from that man after that. It's really something. So you see, he doesn't like that kind of thing, Can't be critical. Just like he told me something, he treated me that way in 79, as late as 79, 10 years after he dropped his body. Remember my experience in India? If I get to that today, I'll tell him that, but I don't know if I'll get to that. There's so much junk here. Then we get to the part where Baba leaves for Australia. We're at the airport in San Francisco, or just outside of San Francisco, and everybody was in tears because Baba was leaving. Well, for once, I was very proud of myself. I thought, no, I have not cried, and I'm not going to cry. That's it. And I was doing very well. And Baba was standing there, and we were in a circle around, and everybody was blubbering away, and I was not crying. I felt sad, but I wasn't, going to give in to this. Then Baba was saying goodbye to everybody. All of a sudden, he put his hand on my shoulder, like that. Well, when Baba wants to get to you, he gets to you. There's no way you can escape. He just got to me, and I just folded up. I put on my dark glasses. And we watched that plane take off. I see the pictures now of the planes. I know what plane it is, because it's the plane with that little tail that goes up. I watched it till it was out of sight. We all did. If we could have dragged that plane back, we would have. It was such a wonderful experience in '56 for me. It was also Tex Hightower's honeymoon too, I understand later, because I wasn't even aware what was going on with anybody else, because nobody was. They were only aware of their own problems and their own interest in Baba. Well, this was fine. Now we get to the tough part. Baba had given us his love. He sent us a cable to the 5 from Australia, and he said, my love to my 5 lovers, which was very nice, wasn't it? I didn't get it right away. They sent it to my old address. I had moved in the meantime, and then they sent me a letter, and then the cable came later. I love to my 5 lovers. Then we got orders. I told you about meeting this other fellow after I had the fight with Philip by letter. And I met this other fellow who didn't take to Baba after he had followed Baba's orders. I got involved with him through telling him about Baba, and then when he met Baba, he was jealous of Baba, and he wouldn't have to do with Baba anymore. Well, I was still going with this fellow after I had left Baba in '56. And then we got orders. I have to write all these dates down, otherwise we go to the dance. When did this happen? When did that happen? So I wrote them all down and found all the old orders out. He gave us orders on sex in August 1957. I remember that. We didn't accept sex discourses. We just couldn't believe in them for a long time. But by then, of course, I realized that Baba, if you do take no lustful action, you don't do it. If Baba tells you not to. So, but Baba must have known people were taking lustful actions, or he wouldn't have given these orders, But he said you must have take no lustful thought, word, or deed from September 1957 to March 1958, which was 6 months of abstinence. That was a tough one, especially for that fellow and me. We were really, 6 weeks, 6 months rather, wow. Well, I thought, I have to obey Baba, and I had told this fellow in the beginning, Baba comes first, so we have to understand that. All right. So here we are. Obedience goes on. I'm obedient for 6 whole weeks. Then one day I meet this fellow by accident. I said, we better not see each other during this time, because, if we see each other, it won't work. So 6 weeks I didn't see him, and then I went to a party, and he was there. Well, that was the end of that. At the end of the 6 weeks, there was no more obedience. Well, that was a terrible time for me. I was so guilty. I thought, oh God, the first time I disobeyed Baba, this is the most horrible thing to happen. And of course he felt great because he thought he was winning. And this went on and on and on and on and on. And finally, the day came and the end of the orders were over, and I felt such a relief. At least now I'm not disobeying him anymore. But we got new orders. I think it was this was in March. The first one was March 1958. We got 1 week after the first orders were over. We got orders, this time just for the unmarried people. So you see, Baba knew about the unmarried people, not only the married, but the unmarried. The married people were okay, they could go on. But the unmarried people now, no sex, from March, continue the same, no lustful thought, word, or deed, from March till July 10th, 1958, 4 more months. That's 10 whole months of abstinence, you see. Well, this was unprecedented. I had never before or since known Baba to give such blanket orders on sex. He may have given individual orders to individual people, which are much more stringent, but not to everybody like that. I mean, to come so soon after the first, only for unmarrieds. Well, this was awful. Well, I thought, no, I've got to give this guy up. There's no way I can do it. If I go on like this, I'm going to lose Baba. And Baba did come first. So I told this fellow, got to finish it. He says, well, I'm not going to continue with this. He said, I don't believe in Baba, and I don't see why I should have to give up. I said, then we have to separate. It's the only way. It's the only way. So I gave him up. And the suffering lasted for 2 whole years. Because we were so close, not only physically, but we were close mentally. We had a lot in common in many ways. But I thought, well, Baba comes first. I love Baba more. But I knew the suffering was not going to I'm not going to have any sop to mitigate the pain, because Baba didn't do that. If you chose something, you suffered for it. Nothing was going to ease the pain. And it went on for 2 whole years. And I suffered and suffered and suffered. It was really horrible. And the funny part was, all the while this period of abstinence was going on, it seemed that everybody was reminding me of it. Probably because it was on their minds too, But they just kept talking about it, and I didn't want to hear any more about it. And it was just too painful, the whole thing. Well, my nerves were on a raw edge. I had a meeting once with this fellow. I would only meet him in the street. He called me. And he said, let's get married. And he brought me a beautiful gift. And he figured, well, if we're going to, the only way we get around it is to get married, you see. But I said, I wanted to say yes, but there was another part of me that said no. I said no, the no one. I said no. Somehow, and I'm glad now that it happened that way. It was the best thing. But what is the marriage just based on sex? It wasn't just sex alone, but I mean, the instance of getting married, you see. Why? And besides, I wanted to obey Baba. So I gave him up. Incidentally, 10 years, I met this fellow 10 years after. He came to my office, and I met him, and I looked at him. By then he had married and had 2 children. And I looked at him, and, I felt only friendship for him. And I thought to myself, what was all the weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth about? What was it? There's nothing. I just had friendship for him. It was all gone. But the suffering that you had to go to, to reach that point, I'm glad it happened. But this fellow, at least he did have Baba's prasad. He had spent the whole evening with Baba at the most happy fellow in New York. He met him at the airport, So someday Baba will pull him in. One day, not in this life, in another life. Then I got orders, right after this, that Baba was coming to the West again in 1958. Well, I had, you can imagine, the guilt, not only me, but I had talked to other people too, and they were guilty too. I wasn't the only one that had fallen by the wayside. There were many of them. And I think there was a lot of guilt down at the center that time in 1958. As I shall tell you what happened. We were to meet Baba again. We all went down on the bus, so we got off at the airport. And when we got to the center, we had been talking on the bus about how we were all going to go into our cabins, get washed, and then go meet Baba. Well, one of the mandali met the bus and says, Baba says, you don't do anything, but come directly to him in the lagoon cabin. Go right directly to him as soon as you arrive, as soon as you get off the bus. So he must have known we were planning what we were planning to do. So we went to meet Baba. Well, when I went to meet him in 1958, there he was, with all the people around him, and I was so full of guilt. I said, why can I look at him again? I was still in love with this other fellow, and felt very miserable. I felt like crying all the time. Yet, what was I doing with Baba if I wanted to be with him? All I had to do was call him, put a phone call into New York, and, it would be fine. I couldn't do it. So, I went to a farthest corner from Baba, behind a lot of people, so he couldn't see me. And then Baba would talk to a few people, and finally says, Billy, where's Billy? And they said, she's over here in the corner, Baba. So Baba says, come over here, Billy. So I had to go over and go sit at his feet. Oh, you can imagine sitting in Baba, and he looked at me, I said, oh God, what am I going to do? I just felt this, it was like a heavy pall on me. And he looked at me and he said, do you love me as much as ever? Well, I thought to myself, like, I had the same feeling then as I did the first day I met him, that years and years were going by, and that it was all short. It was time going fast and slow at the same time. And my mind was racing. What answer can I give him, It seems like the two loves were mixed up together somehow. But I was with Baba. I didn't know what to say. Then he let me off the hook. It shows how kind he is. He said, do you love me more than Anita? That was Anita, the yard who was sitting near him. But that gave me a now. How do I know how much Anita loved him? I have no way of knowing. I said, Baba, only you know all hearts. And he smiled. And then it got me off the hook. But now I'll show you how Baba shows his love to people like me who did things like that I did. There was a point down there where Baba got all of us together again. And this is what makes me think that a lot of people had fallen by the wayside. And he stood with all of us around him and he said, I forgive all of you of all of your sins to this day. Well, I felt better. He forgave this, but you never forgive yourself. You never forgive yourself. And it took me many, many years to get over that feeling of guilt. Not obeying. But while I was down there, I had the joy with Beatrice and Beryl and Ella Winterfeld of cleaning Baba's house. We had to get up around 4 or 5 in the morning to do it. And we'd change the linen on his bed and his towels and clean one room while he was in the other. But then we had the joy of being with him in the morning before the others came in. So we had our little interviews with Baba every morning, all the while we were at the center, and he was there 10 days. Another thing he did, you know, Baba, you've all heard what Baba said, that things are real, are given and received in silence. And this was an incident where it was really so. We were in the lagoon cabin one day, and I was sitting on his right, on the floor. There were a group of 5 of us were in there, and we were reading letters of some kind. Now, we weren't writing letters in 58, but it was something, I don't know what it was. And I was looking at a portrait that somebody drew of Baba. It was on the wall, and I hated that portrait. It didn't look like Baba at all. And here I was almost close to tears then. It's just like, I was just being torn apart. And I was trying not to cry. I didn't want to cry in front of Baba. I wanted to be happy in front of Baba. And I looked at this portrait on the wall, and I was concentrating on it because I hated it so much. To make myself angry, you know, so, you know, offset the feeling of sadness. So I was just working myself into a rage against this. And for some reason or other, I felt Baba draw me to look at him. And I don't know how to explain that feeling. There was no doubt. I knew then that Baba loved everybody. No matter who they are, what they are, how terrible they are, how sinful they are. I don't care, the worst murderer. He loves them. He loves everybody. I never could understand that before, and people used to tell God loves everybody. It's ridiculous. How can he love some people like this, like that? There's probably people like me, you know, nice like me, nice people like me. You don't understand, you know. But, you know, I know it, that Bob, he does. He loves everybody, and there's no doubt. That love was so great. And my healing began then. I began to feel better from then on. It took time. But everything began. He gave me the strength. I never would have been able to do what I did in the first place. If I hadn't known Barbara, I could never have given him this fellow up. You know, because our love was too strong. But he does help you. There's no question. But you have to go through the karmic pattern that you yourself set up. Baba didn't set it up. I set it up. I knew when I started it wouldn't last, because these things don't last. You can't expect them to last. They're human love. It just doesn't last forever. So I knew that. So to expect it is to delude yourself. Well, then we have this look of love. And then the question came up. Apparently some people were having arguments about groups. And I don't know who brought it up to Baba, but Baba again got a group of us around together, and he said, the question has arisen about groups. He says, now nobody has to belong to a group to belong to me. He says, does Kitty belong to a group? Does Elizabeth belong to a group? Does Margaret belong to a group? They don't belong to a group. They could be closer. Nobody has to belong to a group. He says, you can get more work done with a group. And if you need a group, that's fine. Some people work better with groups. He said, but you don't have to belong to a group to come to me. And just he said that, he gave me a look. Boom. Well, I was with the Monday night group at that time. I had been with them for 4 years. But then, shortly after that, when I went back to the United States, went back to New York, I left the Monday night group. I just felt I couldn't be with the group anymore. Not that I didn't like the people, I did. I mean, Fred and Ella Winterfeld, Mike and Dell and Burl, all these people were my close friends all my life since then. But I just didn't want to be in a group, period. I never was a groupie person before, and I only was with the group because I wanted to be with Baba. I wanted to meet him, you see. And I wouldn't like it if there wasn't the Monday night or Being a Baba group in New York where I could go to when I felt like I wanted to go to, you know. But I just don't want to feel I have to go to a group every so often. You see, I don't want to be caged in. I'm a renegade, but the dancers are like that. See, Baba put me with the dancers group, as I explained last night, and how he did it. But the dancers aren't a group in the real sense of the word. We see each other about once, twice a year, you know, and it's very loose. They're all too individualistic to be in groups. And Baba recognized that. I suppose that's why he put me in there. They're difficult people to be within a group. You know, we have to be free all the time. And so that was what he said about the groups. Then another occasion in '58. Baba had several of us come in. He had gifts for us. And he was choosing these gifts, and he gave everybody this and that and the other. And he called me in. Well, you can imagine me in my terrible state of mind to receive a gift from Baba. I just feel so unworthy. He called me in, and I thought, oh, God, oh, how can I take a gift from him? I feel so guilty. I feel so around. I was so full of self-blame. And Baba selected the most beautiful necklace. I would have picked it out myself. It was just my taste, my style, everything. It's a lovely necklace. And he held it in his hand, and I thought, well, that's it. And he said, wait. And he held this in his hand, and he started looking for something else. I said, oh, Baba, one's enough. He said, not to disturb him. And the first time, while he was looking for the second gift, I felt first time I heard him make a sort of a frustrated noise in his throat. You know, people do when they can't find the thing that they want. And he was looking in all this jewelry, and he found a beautiful pair of big round silver and turquoise earrings. Another thing that sort of thing I loved, you know. And he gives me both, and I think, oh, it's like a worm. You know, I said, oh. I said, what can I do? You know, I just pouring ashes of fire on my head, just taking these gifts. Lovely gifts from Baba, but didn't deserve it. So I said, thank you, Baba. What could I do? I had to accept it, and I left. Well, later I lost one of the earrings, and so I decided I couldn't wear either of them anymore, so I put them in a little casket, which I keep on my table. I think you saw when you were at my place. You saw it. And you did too, didn't you? Yeah. So I keep those always. Now there are two contrasting occasions. One was the suffering of Baba, and the other was the comic side of Baba in '58. The dancers had danced for Baba in the barn again this time. They put on quite a show. And Baba was, of course, this time in a wheelchair. It was a carrying chair, something like a sedan chair that the dancers were carrying him around in. There were two poles. You've seen it, I think, with a chair, and two would carry in the front and two in the back, and there were 5 dancers, so they'd rotate, because everybody was jealous about who was going to carry Baba, so they had to rotate to keep everybody happy. Well, the men were carrying Baba all the time, and we were going to the beach one day with Baba in this chair. The dancers were carrying him, and we got near the beach. Baba said, it's only fair that the women should have a chance to carry me, because the women, I think, complained about not carrying him, because the men were always doing the carrying, you know. So he said, all right, let the women carry him. So I don't know who the women were that were carrying, and I was running alongside, and they had never practiced carrying, and they never been about how to lift the chair, and the ones in the back picked up before the ones in the front, and Baba almost pitched out, you know, almost. Well, you know, I enlarged guy, Baba, take it easy. So Baba could do anything about it. Well, Baba was funny. He went like this. And then we went to the beach, and we had a good time at the beach. But now, the day that the dancers danced for him in the barn, the boys were carrying Baba again, and they had dance was over, and they took him out of the barn. They were carrying him in this chair. And all of a sudden, Baba made a gesture to stop and put him down. It's just outside the barn. They put him down, and Baba had the awful look of pain on his face. Everybody got very quiet. They stood silent. The mandali formed a ring around him, and he looked he wasn't there anymore. His body was there, but he wasn't there. I never saw any phenomenon like this before, but he was off someplace. And the pain, the burden was terrific. It was awful. And it was so bad, one woman began to scream, Baba, 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 and she tried to go to him. She really got hysterical. She went out of her mind. And her husband had to hold her back, and a couple of mandali, the 3 men to hold her down, to keep her from getting to Baba. And the Baba stood guard around Baba. And mandali stood guard around Baba. And they finally got the woman away. I don't know where they took her. But she was really hysterical. And then Baba clapped his hands, and he came back. And then he picked up the boys, told the boys to pick up the chair, and he started on again. We hadn't gone a few steps, and they had to put him down again, and again he was off. I know something was going on somewhere where Baba had to be. You'd have to see, it sounds, to say this, it doesn't sound cracked, I guess, but you have to have been there to see this thing. There was no acting here. There was something going on. And there was tremendous suffering attached to it. And then finally, he came back to himself again, and the boys picked him up, and that was the end of that. I never got Baba never referred to it again. The mandali never referred to it. It was just something that the rest of us remembered. And at that time, no outside people had been allowed at the center. And I can see why. These things you can't, you couldn't have outsiders there. I imagine Bobby suspected something was going on, and you couldn't have outsiders. The one thing that happened to me way back in '56 that gave me another insight into Baba was when I hid in the shrubbery one day when you dismissed me, and there was a whole lot of shrubbery, and I was just a little peek hole I could see through, and I could see Baba all the time, and I thought I was well hidden, and nobody did see me, and Baba was meeting people. Every time he received somebody, he seemed to let out a floodgate of his love out. Every time somebody new came in, he just sort of, boom, would come out. And of course, I'd get some of the residue. And as the people, more and more came in, I was sort of getting kind of wobbly in there. And the people, finally, Baba caught me. All of a sudden, his eyes just flashed. He saw me, and he gestured to Erich. So Erich came and dragged me out, I thought, oh God. But he didn't get mad. He let me stay a little while with him. Then he dismissed me. But I can see why, really, Baba didn't let many of us outside the mandali be with him more than a certain amount of time. He'd be with us for as long as he thought we could take it,